The question of resurrection. Luke 20 verse 27, and the truth that transforms. Have you ever faced a question so challenging, so profound, that it rattled everything you thought you knew? A question that didn't just seek an answer but aimed to challenge the very foundation of your beliefs? In Luke 20 verse 27, we encounter one of those questions. A question designed not to seek truth, but to trap and discredit Jesus. Yet, in the midst of the challenge, Jesus reveals something far deeper than just an answer. He reveals a truth that transforms everything we know about life, death, and the world beyond. In this passage, a group of Sadducees, a religious sect that denied the resurrection, approaches Jesus with a scenario designed to mock the idea of resurrection. They present a hypothetical situation about a woman who marries 7 brothers, one after another, all of whom die without leaving children. Their question is simple, but it's loaded with cynicism. At the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Luke 20 verse 33. It's a question meant to expose what they believed was the absurdity of the resurrection. But instead of being trapped by their reasoning, Jesus offers a profound revelation that not only silences them but challenges the very way they understand God, the afterlife, and His authority. Let's dive into this passage and explore the deeper truths that Jesus reveals about the resurrection, the nature of life after death, and the reality of who God truly is. A question rooted in skepticism. To understand the full weight of the Sadducees' question, it's important to understand who they were. The Sadducees were a religious group that held power in the temple and in the Jewish community, but they were also known for their rejection of certain beliefs that the Pharisees held, including the belief in the resurrection of the dead. For the Sadducees, life was limited to the physical existence here on earth, and they could not fathom the idea of life beyond the grave. So when they approach Jesus with this hypothetical scenario, they are not genuinely seeking an answer to a theological dilemma. Their goal is to make the resurrection seem ridiculous, to show that it couldn't possibly make sense. They've constructed an elaborate situation, one that plays on the Jewish law of Levirate marriage, where a man would marry his brother's widow to produce offspring in the name of the deceased. The Sadducees present a case in which this law is carried to its extreme, with a woman marrying 7 brothers and outliving them all. Their question is, at its core, designed to ridicule the concept of resurrection. If there is no life after death, then the idea of a resurrection is meaningless. How could a woman have multiple husbands in a resurrected life? This was their argument, aimed at disproving the resurrection and embarrassing Jesus. They believed that the resurrection, like their question, was a fantasy, and they assumed that Jesus, like many others, would be caught up in their clever logic. Jesus' response: a truth that shatters all expectations. Instead of being caught up in the details of their hypothetical, Jesus turns the question on its head. He doesn't get bogged down by the specifics of their scenario, but instead speaks directly to the heart of the issue, the nature of resurrection and the nature of God. Jesus begins by addressing their misunderstanding. The people of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of taking part in that age and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage. Luke 20 verses 34 to 35. In other words, the resurrection life is not simply a continuation of earthly existence. The way we live here, including marriage, is part of this present world, a world that is temporary and finite. In the resurrection, there will be no need for marriage as we understand it because life will be different, completely transformed. This is a radical shift in thinking for the Sadducees and for anyone who might have believed that the afterlife was merely an extension of this life. Jesus is revealing that the resurrection life is not just life after death. It's a completely new kind of existence, one that transcends human limitations and experiences. It's not bound by the constraints of earthly relationships or institutions. In the resurrection, we will be like the angels, Jesus says, free from the constraints and needs of earthly life, and united with God in a way that we can't fully comprehend in this life. But Jesus doesn't stop there. He goes on to show that the resurrection is not just a theological concept, but a reality that is deeply tied to the very nature of God. He says, But in the account of the bush, even Moses showed that the dead rise. For he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. Luke 20 verses 37 to 38. Here, Jesus is making a profound theological statement. He references the burning bush incident in Exodus 3, when God revealed himself to Moses as, "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Notice the tense of the verb I am, not I was, but I am. Even though Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had long since died, God identifies himself as their God, because they are alive to him. This statement reinforces the truth that the resurrection is real, that death is not the end, and that God is the God of the living, not of the dead. The heart of the matter, life after death and the nature of God. The question of resurrection is not just a theological puzzle. It is deeply connected to the very nature of God. For Jesus, the resurrection is not an abstract concept to be debated. It is a truth grounded in the character of God himself. If God is the God of the living, then those who have passed away are not lost to him. They are alive, and they will rise again. This truth has profound implications for how we view life, death, and the afterlife. First, it challenges our natural inclination to view death as the ultimate end. Jesus shows us that death is not the final word. The resurrection changes everything. The pain and finality of death are not the end of the story. They are a part of the greater narrative of God's redemptive plan. Through Jesus' resurrection, we have hope that death does not have the final say in our lives. Second, Jesus' answer challenges us to rethink our understanding of life. If our earthly relationships, including marriage, are temporary and part of this age, then our ultimate purpose is not bound to earthly things. Our greatest hope and destiny lie in the resurrection, in the new life that Jesus has secured for us. The resurrection life is not about maintaining the status quo. It's about being fully united with God, living in his presence, and experiencing eternal joy and fulfillment. Why this matters for us today. Jesus' words in Luke 20 verse 27 challenge us to think differently about death and life. They invite us to place our hope in the resurrection, knowing that God is the God of the living and that he has the power to raise us up from death to life.